Okay, folks, we have a little bit of an interactive exercise for you here today. And just trust that no matter where you are and whether you're listening or watching to this, we can see you.
That's kind of creepy. So, okay, raise your hand if you're in your 20s or 30s and you haven't started planning for retirement. Now, raise your hand if you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and haven't started planning for retirement.
Either way, don't worry. This is Queer Money episode number 530. And today we're talking with Michael Kim, who in his 20s is already planning for retirement. Consequently, as he'll share, he's on track to retire as early as the age of 55. Wow. Michael talks about his entrepreneurial work and how he's currently slow traveling around the world.
So, if you're starting your retirement planning early, or if you're at that urgent stage of beginning to plan for retirement maybe a little bit later, you want to listen to this episode. So, on with the show.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC. Hello, Michael Kim to the Queer Money Podcast. We're excited for a very inspiring episode today.
Thank you for having me both.
Of course. So
Definitely.
you reached out to us a little while ago about coming on the show. And then when we dove into your story, Dave and I were like, what the heck is going on? Why is this person making all the right decisions at the age where you're supposed to make the right decisions? We waited until we were like 30 or 40 to make those decisions. And as many of our listeners know, one of the most recurring questions we get is from typically 50 to 60-year-old gay men specifically who say, I haven't planned for retirement yet. What can I do to prepare for retirement? And according to your story, you started planning for retirement in your 20s. How are they lacing the water up there in Canada?
You know, a lot of this preparation comes with a lot of fear and anxiety. Like growing up with a lot of financial difficulties and seeing my parents struggle with money, that was really the catalyst of like, oh my gosh, I want to avoid all of the mistakes that they're doing. So I'm going to do everything in my power to try to avoid what they're doing. So, it sounds really good and like the outcome's pretty good, but like it comes from a lot of fear and anxiety.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have to dive into that. But just to set a baseline, what was life like growing up as an LGBTQ plus kid in Canada, and then also in your household?
So, although like in Canada, they say like, oh, we're like super accepting and all of that stuff. I feel like back in okay, like at least when I was young, so about like 20 years ago, the narrative of LGBT wasn't really that good, even in Canada. And so, especially in my family, growing up in a Chinese and Korean immigrant family, first of all, that's like being gay and LGBT is like not even heard of. And
Mm.
then also being like my mom is very, very Catholic. So that in itself is also like typically not very good or portrayed as being queer. And so, yeah, like for most of my life, it was something that I really, really feared because I would hear these horror stories of like LGBT kids getting kicked out of their homes, having to like be on the streets, like fend for themselves. And so I knew that like at a young age, I wouldn't be able to survive on my own. So I would have
Mhm.
to I like was in the closet for most of my life because of this fear that I wasn't financially independent and that if I were to be abandoned by my parents, I would just not be able to survive.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you
Mhm.
think that the being in the closet, not feeling comfortable about coming out, gave you a little bit of a sense of I need to have financial stability because I don't know what will happen when I do come out or if I am outed. And we know that does happen to some people. And so, do you think that that was a little bit of a motivator to say I need to take care of myself financially in case something like that happens?
Yeah, for sure. That was a big part of it. Like one of my biggest fears is like, what if my friends found out, or then, like they told my parents, or like, a cousin found out, and like the family knew. And so I was like, okay, well, like if that were to happen, I need to make sure that I am safe for myself and
Yeah.
that I can be able to take care of myself if that worst case scenario were to happen. And so once I became financially independent, I didn't really have to care as much. It's like, oh, if my parents found out, okay, whatever. I'm like,
Mm.
like
Right.
I'll be okay at least financially. Like I'll be able to survive. But as a kid, like that was definitely a big motivator to be like, okay, like how can I be financially independent so that I can take care of myself?
Yeah. It's we oftentimes hear of the FU fund or the fuck off fund that people have towards their boss because they can leave a toxic environment if they have to. But I think for a lot of queer kids, it's kind of similar. It's not necessarily you want to tell your parents or your family to fuck off, but it is the
Sometimes
kind
you do.
of, well, yeah, true. Sometimes if you have a very unaccepting or unaffirming household, you do kind of just want to say, "See you later,
Bye.
bitches. I'm out of here." And that having that kind of stability to be able to say, "Okay, I can go get a place on my own or with some other people."
Yeah, yeah, that's, one of the reasons why I think financial literacy and helping people with their personal finances is so important to me. Like with gay people, just giving them the freedom in order to be able to come out, like that financial stability. Or even like a lot of women who are stuck in a financial situation with like their husband or like their partner, they also tend to feel trapped and like I have to stay in this abusive relationship. But the
Mhm.
empowerment that you have of just like, oh, I can just like leave a situation that I don't like because I am capable of doing that is so, so empowering.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to dive into your psyche a little bit because your fear of maybe being kicked out of your family's home or not being accepted was one of the motivators. It sounds like that helped you start to pursue financial independence or planning for retirement early or whatever synonym you want to use. Um, but for many LGBTQ plus folks, especially of mine and David's generation, not all, but many, many of us gravitate towards distractions in life to help alleviate some of that anxiety, even if it's only temporary. Drugs, alcohol, partying, smoking, promiscuous sex, all that.
Shopping,
Shopping. Yeah, I mean, there's just a litany of addictions that we
travel,
can rattle off. What was the last one?
travel.
Travels. Yeah, a huge one. We consume this in these addictions, these dopamine rushes, as it were, to try to like desensitize ourselves to the fear of that I'm not planning for retirement, and also to desensitize ourselves to the fear that we're going to be kicked out or that we have been kicked out or ostracized from our family. What do you think it was about you that made you say, I'm gonna focus on my financial and personal safety and security and not necessarily get wrapped up in those distractions?
That's a really good question. I never really thought of that. But when I'm thinking about it now, I think even at a young age, I knew what I wanted. Like I saw my parents struggle financially and I saw how difficult money was, right? Like I saw how my parents were constantly fighting, that their relationship was almost torn apart because of money. I
Mm.
saw them, like the relationship with my parents were not very good because I hardly saw my parents because they were always working. So I was like, oh, this doesn't seem like a really great family dynamic. And so I think a lot of people can either look at the situation and be like, I want to, like, they typically repeat the same situation, right? Like, they take the same behaviors as their parents and then they just repeat it for the next generation. But for me, I was always someone that wanted to learn from other people's mistakes. I looked at my
Mm.
parents' situation and be like, okay, like, this is not what I want for my life. I want a loving relationship where we don't have to constantly be fighting about money. I want to have the financial freedom to be able to travel and to enjoy things. I want the financial freedom to have a nice dinner with my family every single day. And so that's kind of what I saw as my vision for my life. Like, this is the
Mhm.
life that I want to create. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to make this happen. And anything else like drugs and partying and maybe like impulse spending is not going to get me to this goal. So I'm going to instead kind of avoid those things, like learn from other people's mistakes and instead do the things that will get me to the goal and the life that I want to create. I think that's really kind of the driving factor to how I've been able to avoid those things and work
Hmm.
towards my goals.
Yeah.
So what I think then you probably had to have a pretty clear definition of what that goal was that you were looking for, what that goal was. It was did you have did you specifically say this is what I want to work towards, or was it more elusive and say I want to work towards financial independence, or I want to work towards being out on my own, or was it I want X number of dollars and I want to live in this location and I want to have this kind of lifestyle? How did you define your goal?
The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission.
Yeah, so when I was younger, it was definitely not defined, right? Like when I was young, I didn't have the skills. I didn't know how to plan. I didn't know how to budget and do these things. I didn't even know what investing was because, we didn't talk about money in our household. And so when I was a kid, it was more so like what I don't want, right? Like I don't want to be worried about money. I don't want to be like, almost like potentially losing our house. So it's like kind of like what I don't want. And
Mhm.
then what I always say is that with like financial goals and things that we want in our life, it's always changing and it's always forming into different things. And that's totally normal and that's totally fine. For example, in high school, I was like, hey, I just want like a stable job and like live in Toronto. And like, this is like the life that I work towards. And then once I graduated university, I'm like, nah, I don't want that anymore. I want to just travel and enjoy life and like, become an entrepreneur. And so it's okay for your goals to change, but it's just what I like to think of it is you're working towards certain goals so that you can have more options, right? Like you may not exactly know exactly what you want and the exact life that you want, but if you work towards certain goals in a certain direction, then at least you're giving yourself the opportunity to choose whether you live in Toronto or live in, Southeast Asia or like live in somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So I think it's got a lot like that quote, shoot for the moon because at the very least you'll end up among the stars.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that in the world we live in today, especially because of Instagram and TikTok, we're constantly being presented with other people's goals and them achieving those goals. Whether those goals are showing you that I'm living on the beach in Puerto Vallarta or that I have just purchased a Tesla, whatever we're constantly being told, here are all these goals, here are all these goals. And it can be kind of like you're chasing yourself around and around in a circle. If you don't know what your goals are, you're going to end up falling into the habit of chasing after what everybody else says your goals should be. And so having some clarity of what you really want, I think is probably probably assisted you in making progress compared to some other folks.
For sure. I think one of the biggest, factors that determines your success, your financial success, but also just like creating a life that you love and that you actually enjoy is just not caring about what people think. Right? Like if you're caring about the luxury goods so that you can impress, people who see you on the street, or you're working towards that, like big fancy career that you hate, like that job title, then you're not really creating a life that you want and you're not going into the right direction that will actually make a life that you're happy with. And so, like, if you guys are like anyone in the audience is listening, it's like, what would happen if you just didn't care about what people thought and you
Yeah.
instead focused on figuring out, okay, what is a life that will make me happy? What is something that I really want in my life, regardless of what people think? And instead, you put all of your time and energy and focused on that. And I can guarantee that you will probably live a lot happier than caring about what that random person on that street or that random person that your colleague thinks about your life.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think the challenge in there for a lot of people though is that they don't necessarily give themselves the time to be able to think about what it is they truly want because we're constantly getting these messages from marketing, from social media, of what it is that we should want. David and I talk about this a lot. There's a stereotypical what it means to be a stereotypical successfully gay man, right? There's a very clear archetype of what that is, and many of us feel like we need to pursue that so that we can be approved and accepted. And so we never actually give ourselves the time to say, well, what is it I truly want? Maybe I don't actually care about the designer jeans. Maybe I'm just a Levi's kind of guy, but I've never thought about it. And so I just kind of fall prey to what everything else is telling me.
Yeah, having that time to self-reflect and think about like what you actually want is so, so important. And I think the way that I kind of saw it was that like almost because I'm gay, I think it also really helped me to think about like not caring about what people think. Because growing up gay in my family, it's like no matter what I do, whether I'm successful or not successful, I'm going to probably be seen as lesser and by some family members.
Right.
And so it's, pretty bad, but also at the same time, it's very liberating at the same time because it doesn't matter what I do. I get to do whatever I want because they're going to love me or hate me regardless.
Right.
Regardless of what I do. And so I might as well just focus on what do I want to do? What do I want to be? What sort of career do I want to have? And not let their opinions impact my choices and my decision. And I think that, as gay men, we kind of have that ability to just be like, not care because we all went through the same experiences. Some people are going to love us and some people are going to hate us. It doesn't really matter what we do. And so we
Right.
might as well do something that we're really proud of and achieve those goals.
Love that.
Exactly. So what are your retirement goals? Because you do talk about it, talk about retirement a lot. What are your retirement goals?
hmm So as you said, when we were kind of talking about like shoot for the star and you hit the moon? Is that the quote?
Well, shoot for the moon and you'll at least
Land
land
among
among the stars.
Oh, okay. That quote. So that quote really works with my retirement goals. So when I like to plan for retirement, I like to have my vanilla goal and then my ambitious goals. So my vanilla goal is kind of just like if everything were to stay the same and if I just like stay and like continue to do everything that I'm currently doing, this is what's going to happen and I'll be pretty happy and pretty okay with that. On the other side, my ambitious goal is like the goal that I'm actually working towards. And this is like the goal that I'm like actively pursuing. So in terms of my vanilla goal, this is like if I were to retire at 55, age 55 in Toronto, live a, pretty comfortable life. This is my vanilla goal. My ambitious goal that I'm currently working towards is like having a beautiful villa in Italy and with like vacation Airbnbs around the world. This is the ambitious goal that I'm working towards. But if everything stays the same, if I don't want to do anything else, then at least I'll have my vanilla goal of living in Toronto and retired by 55.
Nice.
Nice. I love that. So, if you don't mind sharing, I know a lady's not supposed to share her age. If you don't mind sharing, how old are you and how's your progress in achieving both of those goals, the vanilla as well as the fancy goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally fine with sharing my age. I'm currently 27. So in my vanilla goal, I would say that I would retire by 55. And when I first started saving up for retirement, it was about like 4 years ago. So like kind of around in 2019, 2020, that's when I graduated school. And within the first like 2, 3 years, I was able to build a $100,000 investment portfolio just
Wow.
from the income from my job as well as my side business. So if I were to essentially hit my vanilla goal, what I need now is to save about $2,000 a month for this retirement goal.
Mm-hmm.
So if everything stays the same, if I continuously contribute $2,000, I'll be able to retire by 55 in Toronto pretty comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of my ambitious goal, this is kind of what's really exciting because it's like once your vanilla goal is achieved, you're like, oh, like I really don't have to like worry about like money anymore. And I don't really like you're out of that scarcity, like, oh my God, like survival mode, right? You're kind of just like, okay, like this is okay. I'm safe. I'm okay. What do I want now? Like what will actually make me happy? What is like something, what is my legacy? What is something that I would want to be really proud of? And this is what kind of my business goal. And so my business goal is very ambitious. I want to build a multiple six-figure or even multi-million dollar business, coaching business. And so this is kind of my ambitious retirement goal. Like once this business is very successful, then achieving this ambitious goal of like living in Italy with a beautiful villa is like totally going to be achievable.
You and George Clooney, right? So I'm curious, what are the nuts and bolts of how you're making this happen? And I know you have your business, and we can dive deeper into what that is and looks like. But what are the other elements that are helping you get there? What type of investment accounts do you have? What type of investments do you have? And what other tools or resources are you using to build both of these goals?
So when it comes to planning for retirement, I typically break it down into four main steps. So when it comes to planning for early retirement, the first thing that you need is income, right? You have to figure out what is your expected income during retirement. And this can be things like rental income, business income, investment income, all of that. Okay. The second step is expected expenses during retirement. So this is kind of what I did for my vanilla plan. It's like, how much do I expect to spend during retirement until the day that I die? And for this, it's like typically a lot lower than what your current expenses are. Because like hopefully your mortgage is paid off. Hopefully, well, like if you have kids, hopefully the kids are out of the question and they're off doing their own thing. And then the third step is what is the difference between your expected income and your expected expenses? And this is the amount of money that you need in order to cover your expenses during retirement until the day that you die. And then the fourth step is really figuring out, okay, so now that you know like how much money you need to survive during retirement, now you can kind of work backwards and be like, okay, how much money and savings do I need to have in order to make this possible?
So then that all makes a lot of sense. So then it sounds like, if I'm following correctly, then you're using some investments, which I'm assuming are the stock market.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're going to be investing in your small business. Are there any other broader investments that you'll be investing in?
So when it comes to specific investments that I'm planning for retirement, I typically so when it comes to investing specifically, I like to break investing down into kind of three main skills. The first skill is like, and like seeing it as like a progression of skills. So it's like a lot of people think investing is like super hard and complicated or like day trading. That's kind of like at the like far end of the spectrum where it's like that's like very advanced investing skill level. But on the other side of the spectrum is more of like a basic investing skill, which is like passive investing. So this is when you're investing in like ETFs and broad investments, which invest into the entire stock market, which is relatively safe and easy to implement. If you have like a general idea of what you're doing and how the stock market works. And so for me, about 50% of my investment for retirement is in a passive investing strategy. So this is really easy for me because it's like, okay, I just put in $2,000 into the stock market, bam, it's like invested in all of the ETFs that I need to go. I don't really need to do much research or think about it. The other 50% of my investment strategy is in stock options trading. So this is more of like an advanced investing strategy where you have a higher potential for a return, but then there's also more risk. So I needed to hire like a very advanced investing coach for this. Like I paid about $10,000 USD to learn a stock options trading strategy because you do not want to be doing stock options trading when you have no idea what you're doing. And so with passive investing, you can expect, 8%, 7 to 8% rate of return per year out of your investment portfolio. But for stock options trading, you can expect typically around 1 to 4% return per month. And so, as you can see, there's a lot higher returns for stock options trading, but at the
Right.
same time, you need a higher level skill level in order to implement it successfully.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I have a question for you. You keep on mentioning this number of about $2,000 that you need to invest every month to be
Or
able.
that he's investing in.
Yeah. Will help you reach your goal. For some folks, they look at that number and they, oh wow, that's a lot of money. What have you done with your lifestyle today to be able to make that happen that maybe other folks could learn from?
Mhm. So when it comes to when it comes to money management and personal finances and figuring out like, oh my gosh, like $2,000, that seems like a lot. It's really broken down into three main skills when it comes to money, right? So you need to know how to make money, save it, and invest it if you want to achieve any financial goal. A lot of people think like, oh, like if I just made like, $100,000 or $200,000, I'll be set and I'll be like a-okay. But there are people like doctors and lawyers who make that amount of money and they're still living paycheck to paycheck. And so,
We
yeah.
actually just had a conversation with someone yesterday. They, as a couple, last year earned $1 million US dollars and are living paycheck to paycheck. And
What?
our jaws
Crazy.
dropped when we heard that, because we were like, wow, that's, I think it shows the extreme of what you're talking about here, of being able to separate and make this difference between what you earn and what you spend to give you the opportunity to invest.
Exactly. Right? Like they are clearly extremely good at making money, but where they may be lacking is in terms of the saving part. And so that comes to like the second skill of learning how to save money. Like, how do you reduce your expenses so that you can put money away out of the money that you make, and save a portion of that. And then once you have mastered saving money, then it's like, okay, now that you know how to save this money, how do you allocate your savings into different investment accounts so that it could actually grow and kind of negate the negative effects of inflation and so that you can still afford to buy things in the future. And so for me, how I've been able to save my to achieve my like $2,000 amount to hit my vanilla retirement goal is by first mastering how to make money like through my business and then how to save that money by reducing my expenses. And so I've been able to hire like sales coach and marketing coaches to help me learn how to build a business where I'm making a decent amount of money that I can use to spend. And then also at the same time, I've always been pretty good at saving money. But in addition to traveling, like I live a pretty nomadic lifestyle. And there's a reason why I'm choosing to live in places like Southeast Asia and Mexico rather than going to like Switzerland and Italy at the moment, right? Like if I were
Right.
to go those places, I'd probably like, break even. But now, because I'm choosing to live in places with a lower cost of living, I have so much more money to save and to put away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in addition to the fact that you're living all over the world, which sounds fabulous, everybody likes that idea, but you're not filling your life full of the attachments that cost us so much money. I'm assuming you don't own a car.
I do because I bought it back in 2020, but like it's pretty much just been sitting in my garage, like in my family's home garage.
Yeah. So, and you don't own a home, right?
I don't own a home. Yeah.
Right. I think that we fall into, especially, I think here in America, we fall into this white picket fence lifestyle that,
Mhm.
we get out of high school, we go to college, we get out of college, we meet our partner, we get married, we buy the house, we have the kids, and all along the way, we're building up more and more and more and more regular monthly expenses that will eat away from or steal from the opportunity for us to save money early on. And folks, we've talked about this before. the amount of money that you need to set aside for a comfortable, long retirement when you're young is drastically less than what you have to do, how much you have to set aside when you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. So if you wait until you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, you will look at these numbers and say, there is no way that I can, I think I was doing the numbers the other day. In order to save $1 million, if you're in your 50s, by the time you reach 65, you're going to have to set aside something like $6,000 a month. And if you're in your 60s, you're going to have to be setting aside something like $18,000 a month. And so you're doing it early on because you know that you don't have to set aside as much money, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's like two things of what you said, where it's like a lot of people, they want to buy the house without even thinking about whether they want the house, right? Like they
Right.
just do it because of society. And it's the same thing in Canada and in the US. And that kind of goes back to what makes people financially successful is not caring about what people think. It's like this house is, you know, if you really want to travel the world, then maybe buying a house right now may not be the best thing that is going to make your life happy and make your life successful. And then the
Yeah.
second thing, yeah, go ahead.
No, good. No, go ahead, please. I thought you were done.
And then the second thing is really learning about from people's mistakes. One of the major mistakes that my parents made were like, "Oh, we have the money, so we're gonna buy a nice big fancy house." Even though our normal house, our small house is totally fine and works perfectly fine, we're gonna buy a bigger house just 'cause. And then we bought a house that we couldn't afford. And so to me, learning from their mistakes, I'm like, why would I buy a house that I can't afford? That isn't going to even make me happy. And so this kind of perspective change is really why I've been able to kind of maneuver and change my finances to design a life that works for me. And it may not work for other people, but it works for me.
Yeah, but I think what you're an example of is that you're just living a little bit more consciously. You're more aware of what it is that you want, and you're opening yourselves up to what are the tools that are suitable for me to build the lifestyle that I want. Being nomadic isn't for everybody, right? Being an entrepreneur isn't for everybody. I know there's this entrepreneur porn out there, but not everybody wants that, and it comes with a lot of its own anxiety and stress and work. But what you're doing is you're picking the tools and resources that make sense for you. A lot of people wouldn't pick options trading because it is a challenging trading strategy and stresses a lot of people out. But for those who know what they're doing, they can really reap the rewards of it. But you can also choose another investing strategy. So I just love what you're doing is you're customizing what makes sense for you. You're being proactive in researching that and then in implementing that. And clearly you're on the trajectory to reap the rewards of all that.
Yeah. And what I would say on top of that, it's like you don't have to have everything figured out at the moment, like right now.
Yeah.
Like before, I didn't know how to run a business. Before, I didn't know how to do stock options trading. Before, I didn't even know what investing was. But if you slowly figure out, like, okay, what are some of the tools and what are some of the skills that I need to learn to build the life that I want, then you could start learning and building and developing these skills one by one. And as each skill that you learn and develop, you get closer and closer to that goal and closer to your
Right.
dreams.
Right. As you know, I find that a lot with being an entrepreneur. We had no idea what we were doing initially. It took us a while to figure out, but we kind of learned as we went along and got better and better, you know, the longer that we've existed. I think the same thing happens with investing, right? We've all kind of dove into investing and made abysmal investing mistakes, right? But you kind of learn what works and what doesn't work, and you start to implement more of what does work and stop doing, hopefully, stop doing the things that don't work.
Yeah. I think another thing, what you're describing here is John and I, we use this tagline with our debt-free guys business, live fabulously, not fabulously broke. And I think that a lot of people have this concept of what they think a fabulous life should look like. And what they think a fabulous life should look like is what everybody else has defined as a fabulous life, right? Having the jet, having the fancy cars, having the the house in Italy, you know, all these different things, right? They think that they have to have, and their life won't be fabulous unless they have all these things. But you've taken this time to say, I know what fabulous means to me. And that's one of the things, big drivers that we really encourage people to think about is, what does your fabulous life look like? Not what your fabulous life on Instagram that you can show to everybody, or the fabulous life that this queer celebrity or that queer celebrity is living. What does your fabulous life look like? And that's what you want to work towards, because for most of us, that fabulous life is affordable and achievable if we work towards it. Working towards the fabulous life that celebrities have, many of us go, I'll never get there, right? And then we do maybe make some financial decisions that aren't in our best interest to try to get a piece of that or grasp some of that. And then we can't even have the fabulous life that we would truly want.
Yeah, everything is a trade-off. Like some people don't want to become an entrepreneur and like make tons of money, because in order to do that, you need to put a lot of work and effort. And some people just don't want to do that, and that's totally fine. Like I was recently talking to a fellow entrepreneur, and like she's in the finance world as well, and she makes like maybe a few like $1,000 a month with her business, like not too much. And she's just like, yeah, like this is okay, because she has like a very modest home. She has a rental property, and she doesn't need, like, this is a life that she's comfortable with, and she doesn't desire to have the luxury cars and desire to have the, bigger and better house. She's just very happy with the life that she has. And I'm like, that's such a chill way of like looking at life, and like good for you for like finding that and then figuring out how to maneuver and transform your personal finances to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the boring, quote unquote, boring life can sometimes be very stress free as well.
Yeah.
So would love to have your advice. What like 3 steps would you recommend to our listeners and viewers who are in their 20s and want to start planning for retirement at that young age? What 3 things would you tell them to go start to do right now?
So the first thing that I like to think about financial planning and planning for retirement, it's really like a GPS. It's like for a lot of things in life, we don't really have a plan, especially when it comes to our personal finances. But if you're directionally challenged like me, you need a plan. You need your GPS for everything, right? Like
David's my GPS.
yeah, like I can't drive anywhere without my GPS. And it's the same thing with your personal finances. And so what I would say, 3 steps, simple, is point A. What is your point A? Where are you currently today? What is your net worth? How much money do you have? How much money do you owe? The difference is going to be your net worth. That's your point A. Your point B is your financial goals. So what do you, like, going back to our previous conversation, like what do you actually want? What do you think will actually make you happy? Not your parents happy, not other people on Instagram. What will make you happy? So figuring out what goals in life you want to have and then breaking down those goals. How much money would you actually need in order to make those goals possible?
Mm-hmm.
If you have that, let's say, $100,000, let's say in 10 years in order to like down payment for your house, then you break it down into, let's say, approximately like $10,000 or like $9,000 a year. So like break down your financial goals. And then the third thing is just building a plan. Now that you have your point A, which is where you currently are, and your point B, which is where you want to be, now you just have to work backwards to be like, okay, what do I need to start doing today in order to get from point A to point B? Like this GPS, essentially. Mm-hmm. And this plan is really going to tell you exactly like how much money do you need to be making? How much money do you need to be saving? And where do you need to be investing your money? And this is kind of like the easy step to think about how to achieve any sort of financial goal in your life.
Yeah, I love that. It's very clear and simple. And I think what you're asking people to do is to give yourself time to think about what it is that you actually do want, and then reverse engineer what it's going to take for you to actually get there, which is a whole hell of a lot easier to do in your 20s than it is in your 50s and 60s. So the earlier you can start, the better.
Yeah, it might be this might be your I'm going to take a Sunday off from brunch and I'm going to sit down and
You
just
can
think
still have
about,
mimosas while you do this, because I've
yes,
done it.
yes. Just grab that bottle and sit at home and write down where you're at today and then write down where you want to be tomorrow. And folks, I think it's really important to keep this simple, right? Because the more complicated we make our plans, the more we're going to the easier it is we're going to get bumped off of that plan, right? And then we're going to feel like we're not making any progress. And when we're not making any progress, then we give up on our plans, right? So just keep the plan simple that you can easily adapt it. We all know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but never in life do we ever go anywhere in a straight line, right? We always have things that, especially in the world we live in today, with how fast technology changes, how fast our lives change, how many pressures we have from us on the outside, the simpler we can make the plan, the more adaptable we become.
That's a really good point. In university, I took this financial planning course, and it's like we built this like super duper complicated financial plan that planned everything from like where we are today to like whether we're going to have kids and buy a house and like when we're going to buy a house, when we're going to upgrade the house, when we're going to die, and like it was just super complicated. And as soon as one thing changes, the plan is out the window because the plan doesn't make sense anymore, right? Like anything changes, like the job that you get or like you get a salary increase, the job changes. And so that's the reason why with a financial plan, I typically like to keep it very simple. So it doesn't have to have everything figured out in this plan, just like the general direction and what you need to start doing today. So that if anything changes, like you get a job or you move into a new home, you decide that your financial goals, like you want to change your financial goals, then it's really easy to change and customize your plan.
I love that. I love that. So now we've got a slightly harder question for you. This is a little bit more challenging. What 3 steps of advice would you recommend to somebody who's, say, in their 50s, mid 50s, who hasn't done anything to prepare for retirement? What would you suggest that they do to start to prepare?
So I think in this situation, one of the biggest obstacles and that prevent people from taking control of their finances is really just this avoidant mentality and this avoidance of looking at your personal finances. This is, I'm a big avoider. Like I avoid all of my problems, so I can definitely relate. But like for people who procrastinate on taking a look at their finances in their 40s or in their 50s, it's really because of this behavior and this habit of constantly like thinking about money and being like, oh, this is causing me a lot of stress and anxiety, so I'm going to avoid thinking about it. And then they like avoid it. And then a day goes by, and then a year goes by, and then multiple years go by, and then you're in this situation. And so to break the cycle, it's like the best time, it's going back to that saying, it's like the best time to plan and invest was yesterday. The best time to start is today. And so to start building a financial plan and to start investing is really just the same step as I said before, your point A, your point B, and then build a plan. The only thing that's different is that you got to get started now, and you got to get started as soon as you can.
The sense of urgency is critical.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right, now let's dive a little bit. You've touched on a little before. A lot of our listeners love to travel. They want to travel more. They want to travel in retirement. You're nomadic. What does that mean for you, and how are you subsidizing this nomadic life, especially at such a young age relative to a lot of our listeners and viewers?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Yeah. What does living nomadic exactly mean to you, and how are you paying for this? How are you making this happen at such a young age?
Yeah, so being nomadic to me really just means choosing the best place in the world that makes me happy, that is like where I thrive and where I'm most productive. So, unfortunately, over the past few years, I've actually been dealing with a lot of health issues, like ever since 2021. A lot of like eczema, chronic inflammation, a whole slew of other health issues. And I was really, really suffering when I was in my corporate job, like stuck in Toronto. And a really surprising solution was that I just like happened to book a trip to Mexico. That was like my first digital nomad trip in 2023. I went to Mexico for about 2 or 3 months, and like 90% of my health issues went away.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so much more productive. I'm so much happier. I'm like healthier in this other country. And so nomadic to me means really just going where my body is the best. And when my health is good, business is good. And when business is good, life and money is good as well. So being nomadic is really just choosing a place in the world that makes me happy and where I am the most productive and best suited and best in the best mindset to achieve my goals.
Nice, nice. And then how financially are you making this happen? Is all this being subsidized or paid for by your business, the small business that you built? Do you have other sources of income that are help making this happen?
hmm So there's a few things. So like when it comes to making money, everything is covered either through my business or typically my passive investments passive investments that I'm making through my stock options trading. That's kind of what's covering the income portion. In terms of like the way that I try to keep my expenses low is a few things. So the first thing I would say is geographic arbitrage. So this is where you are making money in a stronger currency, like in Canadian dollars or in USD, which is what I'm doing in my business and investment portfolio, but then living in a country with a lower cost of living, let's say Mexico or in Southeast Asia. So this is one way that I can keep my costs low. Another way of keeping costs low is by slow traveling. So the reason why a lot of people think traveling is super expensive is because they spend like 2 weeks to do a round trip to like halfway across the world. But the thing is when you're living nomadically and you can really just live in a place for like 2 or 3 months at a time, it's so much more affordable because you don't have to pay for your, expensive flights. And then also for like even on Airbnb, like doing a month stay is so much more, like maybe even like 50% more affordable than if you were to do weekly stays hopping between different cities.
Right. Yeah, we know a lot of Airbnb hosts who prefer the people who stick around longer because it makes their job typically a way lot easier, and then they transfer that easiness, that savings, onto the people who are staying there.
Yeah. And folks, many of you know that we spent 3 months in Spain back in 2019, early 2020. And because we booked our stay for 3 months, staying in that one place for 3 months was just slightly more expensive than what our rent was for 1 month when we were living in the United States. And so it really brought our costs for our living costs way down. We saved a ton of money just by saying we're going to stay in have a home base in this one city for 3 months. And yes, we still did a huge loop. We took 5 or 6 days and we went to southern Spain and central Spain, and all of that was affordable because instead of, like you said, taking this 2-week trip and try to cram everything into it and staying in these hotels that are $200, $300, $400, $500, $600 a night, we were able to rent a place for about $1,000 a month that was 5 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I mean, it was a great place that we stayed in, and it sounds like you're doing something very similar.
Exactly. Like in Toronto, so many of my friends pay like over $2,000 a month to live in like a cardboard box in like downtown Toronto. And then I could pay like literally like 1/3 of the price and live in a luxury apartment in Bangkok or somewhere. So I'm like, if I'm not like bound to the city, why am I staying here?
Yeah, 100%. Plus the food is so yummy when you travel.
Yeah. And I think that this really speaks to this idea of, especially when you're young, and you're making choices about your career, making choices that give you some flexibility, that give you freedom. We know there are more and more companies out there that are allowing people to live and work anywhere, that are allowing people to take time where they may not work for a whole month or something. Having that kind of flexibility in your income, the way in which you earn your income, gives you the flexibility to have these other kinds of experiences.
For sure. Yeah, money might not directly bring you happiness, but money does give you choices. Money does give you options. And oftentimes options give you a little bit more happiness in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So this has been super informative and inspiring. I hope hopefully this connects with a lot of our listeners. Before we wrap up, we'd like to ask you a question that we're asking all of our listeners these days. I don't know if people in Canada are feeling as much anxiety and frustration as those of us down here in the United States are. But a lot of us here are feeling anxious. And so we're trying to spread some positivity. What is one thing that has you feeling really positive or good today? It can be related to what we talked about or completely something different.
Yeah, to me, just traveling. Traveling makes me very, very happy. I'm back in Toronto for the next 2 months, so I'm enjoying spending time with family and seeing all my friends here. So that's been really fun. But at the same time, my health isn't like that good in Toronto, even in the summer for some reason. So I'm planning to book my next trip. I want to do like longer term stays. So I'm planning to do like maybe even like 3, 4, even 5 months in Mexico coming up. So I'm really, really excited for that, to just like focus on health, focus on business, and, meeting and enjoying tacos. I miss tacos so much.
Nice. Totally get to missing the tacos thing.
Yep.
Thank you so much. It's been a great interview. Where can our listeners connect with you online and all things social media?
Awesome. You guys can follow me on Instagram or YouTube. My handle is at michaelekim.com. So michaeleekim.com.
Nice. Very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
Thank you, Michael, for a great interview and for setting such a positive example, especially when it comes to retirement planning for the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you, our listeners and viewers, for joining us for another episode. Remember, you can get your Queer Money Takeaway and the other resources that we mentioned in this episode in this week's newsletter.
Then join us this Thursday when we share the most LGBTQ plus friendly cities to buy an affordable home. And next Tuesday, speaking of affordability, when we talk with Heather Boucher, one of the 3 members of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors and the chief economist for the Investing in America cabinet, which isn't a cabinet making company. Thank you and have a great week.
Cheers, queers.